Namaskar. I am Dr. Dilip Panda. Today, that is on 1st February 2024, the Finance Minister has presented her budget in the Lok Sabha. She has presented an interim budget or vote on account because the general election is due to take place within 2 to 3 months. While presenting the interim budget, she had not declared any big announcements either on the revenue side, that is taxation side, or in the expenditure side. Rather, she emphasized upon the continuity of capital expenditure on infrastructural developments. While narrating her speech, she almost spoke like the spokesperson of the BJP rather than the finance minister, because she spent most of her time, she talked for around 1 hour. Most of the time she settled at narrating the achievements of Modi government since 2014 and also what they will do in the future, showing clear confidence that they are again coming back to the power. How Modi government has emphasized upon the development of the poor, the farmers, the women and the youth. Her narrative was more rhetoric than pragmatic and realistic. She had explained that the economy would reach in 2047 to a growth of GDP making $30 trillion. This is not new. The government and its spokespersons have been continuously emphasizing upon the growth of GDP, emphasizing upon the fact that India is the fastest growing economy. It will reach $5 trillion economy. First of all, they were telling by 2024. Now they are telling it after 3 years, it will reach $5 trillion. Then in 2030, it would reach $10 trillion. And in the Vikasit Bharat, in the passage of Vikasit Bharat through Amrit Kaal, while India will be celebrating its 100th year of independence, that is in 2047, it would achieve a GDP of $30 trillion. So this emphasis upon the growth of GDP and calling the fastest growing economy. So a growth-centric development and mesmerizing the people through this growth rate symptoms is extremely misleading, because the quantum of growth is important, but it is not the only indicator of attaining real economic development. That is Viksit Bharat. Again, from the GDP growth or the quantum of GDP, the quality of growth of GDP is also important. That is how, from which source the GDP is growing, who are contributing to the growth of GDP, how this process is taking place. The quality is also important. The per capita income even does not throw a true picture, true light upon the real development of the people and of the country. Because even if the GDP grows at a higher rate, even if the per capita income also increases to a satisfactory level, still then, if the distribution of income is not reasonable and just or equitable, then it will lead to greater poverty in the economy. Since last so many years, economists have been observing a jobless growth in the country. That jobless growth is leading to an increase in inequality of income and wealth. The disparity between the poor and rich is increasing widely. If the growth rate takes place, if the GDP growth takes place due to an increase in the sale of automobiles, that too of SUVs, or due to more sale of iPhones or luxury materials, then it seems that the consumption of the richer classes is increasing because their income is increasing. And in the Indian scenario, it is now traced that the consumption expenditure of the rural class and also of the urban poor is declining. It means that their real income is declining. Whereas at the top of the income scale, the richest section, the sale of luxury goods is increasing. Their consumption is increasing because their income is increasing. So the jobless growth has widened the disparity between the rich and the poor. This inequality would never lead to an inclusive development of the country. Even if we emphasize, even if we take into consideration that the GDP growth or the per capita income as the sole measure of economic development, then also there is some doubt, suspicion. Take for example, that in 2047, the Indian economy would reach or achieve this $30 trillion. At the same time, the increase in the population would, in the rate that is undergoing, would be around 165 crore, 1.65 billion. Looking at that, the per capita income would be around $18,000. Okay, so at this moment, if we have a look that in order to achieve the $30 trillion and the per capita income of $18,000 by 2047, which is termed as Vikasit Bharat Amrit Kaal, then the Indian economy has to grow consistently with a rate of 7 to 8% from today till 2047, which is a very, very top task. In this situation, let us suppose that it would attain $30 trillion in 2047 and the per capita income would be $18,000. Let's have a look at the level of income, per capita income of some countries, some advanced countries. In USA, the per capita GDP or per capita income in 2023 is $83,000. In South Korea, it is $34,650. In China in 2022 is $12,600. $12,600. In China, it is $12,600. and India's per capita income is $2,850. So, in 2047, even if we will be having a $30 trillion economy and 18,000 as per capita income, then where do we stand in comparison to these advanced countries? That's the pertinent question. Now the question is, what actually do we mean by economic development? Looking at the distributional aspect or the contribution of different sources to the GDP, take for example that the largest share come from the indirect taxes, that is GST, to the GDP. Then it comes from the personal income tax, which is direct tax. Then it is corporate tax, from which the third largest share comes to the GDP. So, the largest income comes from the indirect tax source, which is a regressive tax, because in case of indirect tax GST, both rich and poor pay the same amount for the consumption of goods. So, the burden is more upon the poor than the rich. So, if this is the structure of sources from which GDP is being constituted, then the growth structure, revenue expenditure structure is a regressive one. And personal income tax is mostly paid by the middle income classes, whereas the corporate tax is being paid by the corporate sector, the richest section of the society. They contribute less than the personal income, that is middle income class, and the indirect tax GST contributes a larger share to the GDP, which is regressive in nature, where the poor has to shoulder a larger burden than the rich. In this type of structure, a lopsided structure, disparity in income, inequality is bound to occur and bound to be widened also. So, we have to adopt a progressive model of development. What do we mean by development? Economists define it through an increase in GDP, the growth rate, and the per capita income. So, only economic parameter does not constitute a proper economic development model. We must include the quality of life model, that is, multidimensional poverty, which doesn't include only income, rather it also includes health, education, sanitation, hygiene, etc. So, only by measuring income and GDP growth rate, we cannot have a sound definition of economic development. Rather, to have an inclusive development, we must have a sustainable development that would include social progress, environmental sustainability, good governance besides growth. The quality of life must be enhanced, and that can be enhanced by increasing the income, health, education. The capability of the people must increase, those who are in the lower strata of the society. Everybody must have the equal opportunity to enter into, to get quality education, quality health, water, sanitation, hygiene facilities, transport, communication, etc. So, if we would be able to build up such a model of growth, then only we can tell that the Vikasit Bharat, within this Amrit Kaal, by 2047, we can travel in a developed India. And that must have some indicators, some parameters which we may categorized like this, that there must be uniform implementation of rule of law. There should not be any discrimination. Justice must reach to everybody's door. That is, even the poorest person must also be able to approach the highest court of the country. Constitutionally, it is possible, but practically, it is not possible. So, justice must be provided at the door. Social and economic equality must be attained. Capability of the poorer classes must be widened, increased, so that equal opportunity will be upheld by all sections of the people. Then, cleanliness everywhere. I mean, at roads, public places, discipline must be there while traveling in trains, buses, or in public transport system, or moving in public spaces. There must be respect and tolerance towards dissent and disagreement. There must be more seminars, discussions, academic activities rather than unnecessary display of wealth through social functions or religious activities. So, in order to have the holding of such type of activities, having discipline, respect to the rule of law, and eradicating corruption, hunger, starvation, and poverty completely, that would make the country a real Vikasit Bharat in the Amrit Kaal by 2047. And all these things could be attained only when all these things would catch the political imagination. What I mean to say is that elections must be fought on the name of health, education, and rule of law, all these things, not with freebies or your unnecessary caste, religion, etc. on this basis. When these factors would come, that is employment opportunities, job, guarantee of jobs, and education to all, quality education to all, drinking water, etc. All these factors must come within the political debate, political discussion during the time of elections. Unnecessary election manifesto, unnecessary things must not be there. When these factors would come, then only we will have a real Vikasit Bharat by 2047, that is in the Amrit Kaal. Thank you. Namaskar, Dr. Dilip Panda.